Declassified, 1944. High above the sweltering emerald jungles of the Pacific, a lone hunter moved with uncanny precision through the endless blue. Below him, Japanese fighters clawed skyward, engines screaming, desperate to intercept American bombers pushing deep into enemy territory. Yet none of them had the slightest idea they were being stalked by a phantom. This phantom was not a hardened killer, forged in the fires of war. He was a quiet farm boy from Wisconsin, a young man who had spent his early years among the rolling fields and forests, learning patience and observation. By the time the war ended, he would claim 40 confirmed aerial victories, a record of destructive skill that remains unmatched, a testament to a singular combination of human instinct and machine mastery. How did this unassuming young man, whose friends back home would never have imagined him a warrior, become the deadliest pilot in the United States Army Air Forces? The answer lay in a convergence of extraordinary natural ability, relentless practice, and a mind that could think in 3 dimensions at hundreds of miles per hour. While Richard Ira Bong was perfecting his marksmanship on the farm, the world around him was erupting into flames. In Europe, the Nazi war machine marched across nations with relentless precision. In the Pacific, the Empire of Japan executed a campaign of brutal conquest across islands and seas. By 1941, America remained a sleeping giant, untouched by the full force of global war. Yet the winds of conflict had already begun to stir across the oceans. Bong, like so many of his generation, felt the call to serve. Driven not by a desire for fame or recognition, but by an intense and pure love for flight, he enlisted in the Army Air Corps Aviation Cadet Program. From the beginning, instructors recognized something remarkable in the boy. He did not merely pilot an aircraft, he became one with it. The controls were not tools. They were extensions of his own body, intuitive and responsive to his slightest impulse. But talent carried a dangerous edge. Stationed at Hamilton Field in California, Second Lieutenant Bong was introduced to the P-38, Treated Lightning, the most advanced fighter in the American arsenal and a machine that demanded respect. He fell in love with it, and that love almost destroyed his budding career. Official reports would later describe a series of unauthorized aerobatic maneuvers, sanitized into bureaucratic language that could never capture the sheer audacity of what occurred. Bong treated the skies over San Francisco as his own personal proving ground, diving past skyscrapers so low that onlookers could see rivets glinting on the wings. He looped the Golden Gate Bridge in a breathtakingly reckless display, ignoring every regulation and protocol. To his commanding officers, it was flagrant disobedience. To Bong, it was an experiment, a test of limits, his own and the machine's. General George Kenney, a man known for his sharp mind and unwavering discipline, was in command of the 5th Air Force. He had no patience for hotshot antics. When Bong was summoned, expecting permanent grounding, he faced a reprimand so severe that a lesser man might have broken under it. But Kenney looked beyond the bravado, seeing what Bong's flight instructors had already recognized. A prodigy. This was not arrogance. It was confidence born from a deep, unshakable understanding of flight. Kenney made a decision that would alter the course of the Pacific Air War. Rather than destroy the career of the audacious young pilot, he would mold him into a weapon. Bong was kept under direct command, given additional training, and then unleashed into the crucible of combat. By September of 1942, Bong found himself deployed to New Guinea, a place where the war's brutality was etched into every tree and muddy airstrip. Here, American forces were locked in a desperate struggle to halt the Japanese advance. The pilots he would face were not novices, but battle-hardened veterans of the skies, masters of aerial combat who had honed their craft since 1937. They flew the legendary Mitsubishi A6M-0, a fighter celebrated for its agility and precision. On paper, a farm boy with limited flight hours seemed destined for failure. But Bong's P-38D Raiders, P-38 Lightning, was unlike anything the Japanese had encountered. Designed by the legendary Clarence Kelly Johnson at Lockheed, the twin-boom aircraft possessed raw power and lethal potential. Its four 50 caliber machine guns and 20mm cannon, all mounted in the nose, allowed for devastatingly precise fire. Unlike wing-mounted guns, which required perfect convergence, the P-38's concentrated fire could obliterate a target in a fraction of a second if the pilot's aim was true. Yet mastery of the P-38 demanded more than courage. The plane was temperamental and dangerous, prone to a phenomenon called compressibility during high-speed dives, where shock waves could freeze the controls and hurl a pilot to a fatal plunge. Many had already perished trying to tame its raw power. The Japanese, experienced in dogfighting, would attempt to lure American planes into slow, turning battles where their nimble Zeros had the advantage. Bong, however, had no interest in playing their game. From his earliest missions over Buna, he observed and calculated. He understood that survival required innovation. His doctrine was simple yet ruthless. Climb above the enemy, always maintain altitude, convert it into speed for high-velocity attacks, fire with precision, and immediately return to safety. Turning with a Zero was suicidal. Speed and height were the only advantages worth exploiting. His combat reports were clinical, noting altitude, engagement, and outcome, yet concealed a genius at work. Gun camera footage later revealed a pattern of patient stalking, careful positioning, a brief and devastating burst of fire, followed by immediate disengagement. Fellow pilots watched in awe. Major Thomas Lynch, himself a decorated ace, described Bong's approach as surgical, efficient, precise, and devastating. He did not waste ammunition, nor did he rely on luck. Instead, he relied on calculation, anticipation, and instinct honed over countless hours of disciplined practice. Bong's victories began to mount. One kill, then two on a single sortie. A bomber destroyed here, a Zero eliminated there. He became a ghost in the sky, appearing without warning, striking with lethal accuracy, and vanishing before the enemy could react. The Japanese, analyzing their losses, began to note a terrifying pattern: attacks from above by a twin-tailed devil. The P-38 earned a fearful nickname, the Fork-Tailed Devil, and Bong was its most lethal practitioner. On his own plane, he painted the name of his sweetheart, Marge, a talisman in the Pacific skies. By early 1943, he had become an ace, his reputation growing as rapidly as his confirmed kills. By mid-1943, Richard Bong's name had begun to echo across the Pacific theaters, whispered among American pilots with reverence and among Japanese commanders with dread. The quiet farm boy from Wisconsin had transformed into something far beyond ordinary, a force of nature in the skies. Each mission was a study in patience, precision, and the ruthless calculus of combat. Bong no longer merely survived, he dominated. His tactics, once experimental, had matured into a doctrine that dictated every engagement, turning the skies over New Guinea into a proving ground where he alone seemed untouchable. One sweltering July morning above the port of Lae, New Guinea, the air was thick with smoke and tension. A massive formation of Japanese bombers, escorted by a swarm of Zeros, thundered toward Allied positions. On the ground, soldiers huddled in mud-filled foxholes, eyes darting upward as the ominous roar of engines grew louder. To them, it seemed an unstoppable tide of destruction. But high above, Bong and his squadron ascended into the blinding sun, their silhouettes sharp and deliberate. Bong positioned his formation with a strategist's eye, using the sun as a weapon to blind the enemy. He waited, patient and cold, for the perfect moment, watching for a single bomber to reveal a vulnerability, a zero to falter in its formation. When the moment came, Bong gave the order to strike. His P-38s plunged with the inevitability of predatory sharks. Descending with terrifying precision, Bong himself led the charge, the nose of his aircraft a silver spear, targeting the heart of the enemy formation, the bombers. A single exacting burst from his nose-mounted cannon sent a Mitsubishi bomber erupting into flames, shredded in a blossom of black smoke and fire. He did not linger to savor the destruction. Already climbing, he converted his momentum into altitude, scanning the sky for his next opportunity. His squadron followed, executing the same disciplined strikes with devastating effect. The Japanese pilots, outnumbered and outmaneuvered, could not adapt to this methodical chaos. They were being hunted, and the hunter was precise, efficient, and relentless. By November of 1943, Bong had claimed 21 confirmed victories. This was not merely impressive, it was historic. He had become one of America's foremost aces, a living symbol of courage in a war desperately in need of heroes. The careful eyes of General Kenny, ever perceptive, recognized the value not only of Bong's skill, but of the inspiration he provided. He personally decorated Bong with the Distinguished Service Cross, a recognition of bravery and tactical brilliance. Yet with honor came the burdens of fame. Bong was soon summoned back to the United States, forced into a war bond tour that showcased him as a national icon. Parades, speeches, and handshakes replaced the cockpit and the roar of engines. He was celebrated, photographed, and heralded across the country, yet inwardly, he was miserable. His heart remained in the skies over New Guinea, with the pilots still fighting and dying. To Bong, this tour was a cruel performance, a distraction from the war he felt compelled to continue. Relentlessly, he petitioned for a return to combat. Finally, in March of 1944, permission came. He returned to New Guinea, this time assigned to a new, upgraded P-38J Lightning. This refined aircraft was a marvel of engineering, boasting improved engines, better cockpit heating for high-altitude operations, and hydraulically boosted ailerons that provided unmatched maneuverability. In Bong's hands, the P-38J became more than a fighter. It became a scalpel, a surgical instrument for war. The Japanese Air Forces, battered by attrition, faced an experience gap. Many veteran pilots were gone, replaced by younger, less skilled men. Against them, Bong's mastery was overwhelming. His tactical innovations evolved alongside the aircraft. The head-on attack became a hallmark of his genius, a maneuver requiring extraordinary nerve. While most pilots would instinctively break off to avoid collision, Bong pressed forward, firing until the last possible second. The closing speed could exceed 800 miles per hour, with the window for a kill measured in fractions of a second. Gun camera footage later revealed a pattern of audacity and skill that was breathtaking. He flew through the debris of his victims, unflinching and unhesitant, a demonstration of total command over both machine and environment. In one notable engagement, Bong led a formation against a heavily defended Japanese bombing raid. Using altitude, sun positioning, and the disciplined application of firepower, his squadron destroyed multiple bombers while sustaining minimal losses. His approach contrasted sharply with the typical dogfight of the era, which often descended into desperate, turning battles where speed and patience were abandoned. Bong's attacks were surgical strikes, executed with an almost mathematical precision. Other pilots marveled at his efficiency, noting that his hits were rarely missed, his ammunition rarely wasted. Every maneuver, every burst, every dive was the product of observation, analysis, and instinct honed to perfection. By June of 1944, Bong's tally had reached 28 confirmed victories, surpassing the legendary World War I ace Eddie Rickenbacker's record of 26 kills. America's greatest living fighter ace had emerged, a symbol of national pride and military excellence. General Kenny, ever cautious, prohibited him from routine combat missions, declaring him too valuable to risk. Bong, however, was undeterred. Compromise allowed him to continue flying only high-priority missions as a flight leader, directing battles rather than merely participating in them. He became a general in the sky, controlling engagements with an authority that few could challenge. The restrictions, rather than diminishing his effectiveness, amplified it. Being sent directly into the thickest fighting placed him precisely where his skill was most decisive. In October of 1944, over Balikpapan, Borneo, Bong faced one of his most perilous missions. Tasked with escorting B-24 bombers striking Japanese oil refineries, he encountered a desperate and heavily fortified enemy defense. The sky erupted into a maelstrom of twisting aircraft and screaming engines. Bong, true to his method, positioned his formation with the sun at their backs, a tactic that blinded the enemy. Leading the initial strike, he dove on a Japanese fighter, firing a precise burst that sent it spiraling to destruction. But in the chaos, his own P-38 was struck. Cannon shells tore through the right engine, warning lights flashed, and the aircraft began to falter. Most pilots would have disengaged, retreating to safety on a single engine. Bong did not. He assessed calmly, feathered the dead propeller to reduce drag, activated the fire suppression system, and returned to the fray. Even crippled, he remained lethal. Another enemy fighter fell to his guns before he finally began the perilous journey home, nursing the battered plane across hundreds of miles of ocean. His P-38 was declared combat ineffective, yet Bong's intimate understanding of the aircraft allowed him to survive and continue flying within weeks. This incident solidified his reputation as fearless and unbreakable. By December of 1944, Bong had achieved 40 confirmed aerial victories. The achievement was staggering, beyond comprehension for most pilots, and a record that would stand for all time. At the highest levels of command, General Douglas MacArthur issued orders that Bong be permanently grounded. His war was over, not by his own choice, but by the judgment of those who recognized the national and symbolic value of his life. Bong's final combat mission, on December 17, 1944, was an uneventful patrol, lacking enemy contact. The era of America's deadliest ace of aces had quietly come to an end. Even as he returned to a nation weary of war, hailed as a hero, and celebrated as an icon, Bong remained humble. He communicated through actions, not words. His victories were less about ego and more about duty, protecting bombers, supporting ground troops, and ensuring that each sortie was executed with maximum efficiency and minimum waste. His methods, honed through 200 combat missions, became a foundation for American fighter tactics, emphasizing discipline, patience, and the intelligent use of aircraft capabilities over brute aggression. Letters to Marge, his beloved, revealed the man behind the legend. A pilot committed to his duty, guided by focus, calculation, and a deep respect for the lives he protected. As 1945 dawned, Richard Bong's life had shifted from the relentless roar of combat to a different kind of service. Permanently grounded from combat, he was no longer the hunter of men, but a guardian of knowledge and skill. Yet the warrior within could not remain idle. The military, recognizing his unparalleled expertise, assigned him to become a test pilot. The world of aviation was on the cusp of revolution. For 40 years, piston engines had dominated the skies, but now a new, terrifying technology was emerging: the jet engine. At Lockheed's secretive Skunk Works facility in Burbank, California, Clarence Kelly Johnson, the designer of Bong's beloved P-38, had developed America's first operational jet fighter, the P-80 Shooting Star. The P-80 represented the future: sleek, single-engine, capable of speeds exceeding 500 miles per hour, with an entirely new flight regime that demanded courage, skill, and innovation. Bong, accustomed to mastering the pinnacle of piston engine fighters, now faced a machine that behaved in ways that defied instinct. There was no propeller to torque, no familiar patterns of lift and drag, only raw, screaming thrust and the constant, unnerving feedback of jet flight. Every pilot transitioning to jets was an explorer in uncharted territory, and Bong approached the challenge as he had every other, with focus, precision, and respect for the machine. For several months, his life became a disciplined routine of technical evaluations, flight logs, and detailed debriefings. The P-80 was unpredictable, unforgiving, and unlike anything he had ever flown. Yet Bong adapted rapidly. His innate feel for aircraft, the same quality that had made him America's deadliest ace, allowed him to master the jet's quirks, to explore its boundaries, and to provide crucial feedback to engineers. He was no longer leading men into combat. He was pioneering the rules of aerial warfare for a new era, laying the foundation for future generations of pilots. Then came a day that would mark the end of Richard Bong's life. On a hot, clear day in August of 1945, he prepared for a standard acceptance flight on a P-80 fresh off the production line. He went through pre-flight checks with meticulous care, climbed into the cockpit, and sealed the canopy. The jet engine screamed to life, and Bong taxied onto the runway, ready to demonstrate the capabilities of this new marvel. The P-80 crash claimed Major Richard Ira Bong, America's ace of aces, on the same day the atomic age began, marking a tragic irony. Yet his legacy endures through 40 unbroken victories, 200 missions, and the fighter doctrines he perfected. Known for precision, patience, and disciplined tactics, Bong shaped aerial combat for decades. His letters reveal a humble, duty-driven man, devoted to protecting others rather than seeking glory. The restored P-38 Marge and his Medal of Honor preserve his memory at the Richard Bong Veterans Historical Center. Bong's methods remain a blueprint for fighter pilots, a testament to skill and intellect. Above all, he exemplified courage, mastery, and the quiet strength that forever changed the skies.